Oh, hey, Amalia. Oh, hey, Salad Malia. Wow, you look terrible. Thanks. So where you been? When's the next video? Where's the content? Oh, I have been, busy. Yeah. Busy. Uh-huh. I have been told that I have opinions, and that's probably news to nobody around me, especially myself. I actually really like tier list videos, and I've been wanting to do one for a while. Doing a Zelda one was actually suggested to me in my Discord server by Slyrocker, so thank you so much for suggesting that. I am excited to jump in and hopefully not get flamed in the comments for my Zelda opinions. Hopefully. But before we begin, do you like my hair? I grew it out. I have emo bangs now. Originally, I was only going to use one hairstyle while recording YouTube videos, but then I kind of decided, that's boring. I'm gonna use all of them, and nobody can stop me. Anyways, Zelda stuff. Before we kind of jump into this tier list, I want to give a bit of background about my experience with Zelda. I will admit, compared to other millennials around me, I got into Zelda relatively late. My first experience was technically Oracle of Seasons when I was a hatchling, but as you probably know if you've played that game, it's not super straightforward, and young Amalia was prone to getting lost very easily, so I did not make it very far. I then played Wind Waker on the GameCube a bit later, and had a blast with it. Then I continued on with Twilight Princess and then Skyward Sword afterwards. I have always felt kind of bad that I missed some of the earlier titles because they are so legendary, so recently I've been steadily working through various older Zelda games. I actually streamed my first playthroughs of Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and A Link to the Past over on the Purple site, shameless plug by the way, and found that while I felt like I was kind of a casual Zelda fan before, I've become a lot more of a Zelda fan lately. I even have the Hyrule Historian now, and love flipping through the pages to see all the cool concept art. So I kind of love Zelda now, and of course I have opinions on the games. I've taken the following tier list and I've divided it into 6 categories so that I can talk about those opinions. Every single game in the franchise is listed, including spin-offs. Here are the following categories. Category 1, a masterpiece. This is a game that I'd easily replay because it's just genuinely such a good experience. Category 2, very, very good. This is for a game that I love, but it's not my absolute favorite in the series. Category 3, a good experience. This is for games that are good experiences, but I wouldn't be in a rush to replay them anytime soon. Category 4, I like it, but this category is for games that I did enjoy mostly, but they have some glaring issues that hampered my enjoyment. Category 5, I never want to play this again. I think that category name probably speaks for itself. And then category 6 is the never played category, which is also self-explanatory. Let's rank some Zelda games. The Legend of Zelda. I have not actually played this game, so it's going into never played. I have been thinking recently about playing it on NSO though. It's the original title, I feel like I gotta explore it at some point. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link. I have not played this game in its entirety yet, but I'm gonna hit you with a hot take. I kinda thought it was fine when I did play it. It has an incredibly different style of gameplay, but I found that to be intriguing despite it being a large departure. The level up system is kind of neat, but I understand why nothing like this was used in the future titles, as it's just way, 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 way different. It kind of feels more like a traditional RPG rather than a Zelda, since it does have a level up system, and that's really not a bad thing. I feel like a lot of people give this game hate because its gameplay is just different. But I think it's legitimately a perfectly fine game from what I've played. But caveat, I haven't played much past the first dungeon, so maybe my opinion will change when I do eventually get back around to this game. I do recall some of the enemies being pretty frustrating. I'll put this under a good experience for now, but we'll see if my opinion changes once I go back. A Link to the Past. I enjoyed this game. This game has so much charm and just a lot of good stuff to it. There were a few boss fights and dungeons, I'm looking at you, Turtle Rock, that felt really jarringly difficult or had annoying mechanics. But overall, this game just felt like a good game. If I had some gripes, it would be that some of the dungeons didn't feel like they had much of their own personality, and some of the mechanics felt kind of hard to figure out. I think if I hadn't been actively streaming this, I would have gotten lost a lot. Thankfully, I have some really good people in my community who guided me when I did get lost. I think this one is definitely worth a play if you like 2D Zeldas. Again, it just has a lot of charm, and I'll be honest, the pixel graphics are really good for its age. I was impressed. The music's also banging, but what can you expect? It's a Zelda game. The music is always banging. A Link to the Past though, I'm not in a super big rush to replay it, but I still thought it was a great experience, so it's gonna go under a good experience. Link's Awakening. I have never played a single iteration of Link's Awakening in my life. I really want to play the remake though. I'll be streaming my first playthrough of it, again, on the Purple site, so please consider swinging by if you'd like to see that. But until then, have not played Link's Awakening, so it is going into the never played category. Ocarina of Time. This is a game that I appreciate, weirdly enough, the more I play it. After beating it the first time, I thought it was a decent game, but definitely flawed in several ways. The camera is probably the worst enemy in the entire game, the horse controls are abysmal, and the world feels a little empty. But these are all symptoms of the game's age, which I give it a lot of grace for. I think for when it came out, it's a beautiful experience, and just a great game. It did start the foundation of 3D Zeldas for a long time to come, so I gotta give it props for that. I do really like running randomizers of this game, which I think has given me a lot of appreciation for it. It's not my favorite Zelda by a mile, but it's still just a really good time. I think my favorite dungeon is the Spirit Temple. I like mirror reflection puzzles a lot, so this should probably surprise nobody. It feels good to solve the stuff in the Spirit Temple, and that to me is a sign of a good dungeon. Overall, Ocarina of Time, I say, goes into very good. Ocarina of Time 3D. I actually did play a fair amount of the 3D remaster of Ocarina of Time. I actually played it before the original, although I stopped after the Fire Temple. Still, it was a decent enough jump into the game that I can tell you that I had a good time with it and probably would continue to have a good time with it if I were to pick it back up again. I put it down because my life was a little hectic at the time due to me moving to the manor where I currently live. Then I kind of forgot I was playing it. Just ADHD things, I tell you. But really, I had a great time with this remaster. I'll echo much of my commentary about the original Ocarina of Time and just say it was good and the camera was less scuffed feeling, so generally very good, especially with regards to the quality of life changes that were made. Majora's Mask. Majora's Mask really delivered what I kind of had wanted from Ocarina of Time, and that was a world with NPCs that I cared way more about than I thought possible. I loved every second of playing this game, despite how nervous I was to initially try it out. The timer honestly barely inconvenienced me, which was my major worry. I can see how it would be a frustrating mechanic to maybe younger people playing the game, but I thought it was totally fine. There were a few times where I misinterpreted how to do the side quest, and that got a little annoying because I'd have to restart the side quest from the start of a new cycle, but it wasn't egregiously painful or anything. I really liked how going through this game, you got to appreciate all the little struggles each NPC was going through each cycle. The only major gripe about this game that I have is the bosses were kind of weird and didn't feel mechanically like Zelda bosses. They felt a little more freeform and less structured in terms of how to beat them, which isn't necessarily bad, but it felt really weird in a linear 3D Zelda. I've been told I missed a mechanic with Odolwa in particular, but I cannot for the life of me figure out how to do that fight rather than just bum rushing him and hoping for the best. I don't know. The bosses could have been better, but everything else was stellar. If I had to pick a favorite dungeon, maybe Snowhead, funnily enough. Definitely not Great Bay Temple. Heck that place. Majora's Mask goes into Masterpiece because I just adore this game so much. Great game. Fantastic game. Everyone should play it. Majora's Mask 3D. I only recently played the original Majora's Mask and realized how much I adored that game. It probably is surprising that I didn't run out and immediately buy a copy of the 3D remaster, but well, I haven't felt the desire to, honestly. I have the original, so I'm kind of like, why bother? But I heard it was a little bit controversial anyways with some of the controls. I haven't played it again, so I can't really comment on that. It does go into the never played category. Oracle of Seasons and Oracle of Ages. Although these were the first Zeldas I started with, I don't actually remember much about them. I do have the distinct memory of these games being difficult, which tracks from what I've heard. I plan to give them an earnest try now that I'm older and only slightly less prone to getting lost. So for now, I'm gonna say I've never played them, even though that's technically not true. I just don't remember much about them. Four Swords. I have also never played this, but maybe someday. I feel like I only recently realized that this game and Four Swords Adventure were two separate games. Kinda, sort of, I think. Anyways, haven't played it, so it goes into never played as well. Hopefully we can change this sometime soon. Wind Waker. An absolute masterpiece, and nobody can tell me otherwise. Wind Waker was the first 3D Zelda I played, and definitely the first I fell in love with. I actually did not finish it for a while because I love just going around and sailing about. Seeing the cool islands that were there to explore was just an absolute delight, and the soundtrack is S tier. S+ tier, honestly. Easy S+ tier. Wind Waker is probably the first time I ever got to experience an open world game feeling, even if the game is technically not considered a proper open world game. When you get the King of Red Lions, everything just opens up, and I think that's where this game really shines. It emphasizes this feeling of adventure and magic, and the world is full of such interesting characters that honestly feel unique. It just feels like a wonderful game to play. Now, I won't pretend like Wind Waker is a perfect game, and I do understand the criticisms about things like its number of dungeons, the art style, and even the Triforce shard hunt. Personally, those things do not bother me in the slightest, but I can understand the frustration some people might have. I actually really enjoy the cartoonish style, and I think it makes Wind Waker continue to look just super good even all these years later. If I had to pick a favorite dungeon, it would probably be the Earth Temple, which has really good music, puzzles that are fun to solve, and, well, Medley is probably one of my favorite Zelda characters ever, so maybe I'm a little biased. I'm gonna go ahead and put this into Masterpiece because it deserves that, and nothing less. I'll even come out and say that Wind Waker is still my favorite Zelda game even to this day. It just has good charm to it, and I feel good when I play it. Wind Waker HD. With all of that being said, despite owning a Wii U, I have yet to play the Wind Waker HD remaster. I really wasn't super interested in buying it when it released because I still have a functioning copy of Wind Waker and a functioning GameCube. I was also working a minimum wage job and had no hope of even affording it, but details. I'm gonna sadly put this one into never played, but I want you all to know I have no doubt it would be in the Masterpiece, that category, if I had actually gone out and played it. Maybe someday, I say, writing this script technically before the Nintendo Direct, where it could be announced, but it didn't get announced because I am recording this after the Nintendo Direct and I'm still upset. Maybe one of these days it'll come to Switch. Maybe one of these days. Anyways, it's going into never played. Yeah, it's going into never played. But we all know it'd be in the Masterpiece section if I had played it. Four Swords Adventures. After editing all of this video, basically, I got to play Four Swords Adventures. I'm gonna keep this really short, but it's good. It's very chaotic. I like it. I got to do a 4-person session with it, and I'm excited to play it again, so it's going under a good experience. Minish Cap. Okay, my Minish Cap story is pretty sad, so grab your tissue boxes. I started playing this game several years ago, and I absolutely adored it. I had a super good time. I played it for, I think it was about 4 days. I'd gotten a used copy and I was having just, again, a grand old time with Minish Cap. I don't think I was super far into the game when the cartridge just straight up died mid-playthrough. I was at maybe like dungeon 2 or 3, but I was just having a blast enjoying the pixel art. I really like pixel art, by the way. And just the vibes had been great. Then the cartridge died. It died, and I was so sad, guys. I was so upset. I could literally never bring myself to turn the cartridge back in or see if there was a way I could salvage it. I just sat there and was sad that the game just wouldn't boot. I haven't thought about trying to go back to that game until recently because I was so upset. But I think a full playthrough is on my docket for this year. It was a really charming and good time from what I played. I kind of liked Eslo, I think that's his name, and having Vati around was a nice change of pace. I'm gonna put this as good experience for now, but I would not be surprised to see it rise in the ranks after a full playthrough. Twilight Princess. Twilight Princess is, despite it having been my third Zelda, the first Zelda game that I actually beat. It was a Christmas gift from my parents along with a Wii. Yes, I have played the Wii version. Papa Solaris apparently woke up at 3 a.m. to wait in line to get a Wii, bless his soul. And he knew we liked Zelda, so he got us a copy of Zelda. Us being me and my siblings. Twilight Princess has a really great atmosphere about it, and I really liked the concept of the Twilight Realm and the Hylian world as well. Much like Wind Waker, this was a game that I booted up sometimes to not really do the story or not really progress anything, but just to like run around and enjoy the sights. I remember spending hours fighting Bulblins on horseback and thinking about how good it felt to fight them. The game is quite long, but each dungeon feels pretty unique. If I had to pick a favorite dungeon, it would be Arbiter's Ground, which aesthetically is just super cool and has one of the best boss fights ever. And it has the spinner, which is just amazing. I really want them to bring that back, by the way. That'd be a nice tool for them to bring back. Twilight Princess also gave us Midna, who remains the best sidekick we've had in Zelda. I will not be accepting any arguments. If I had to knock Twilight Princess for anything, it's for coming out in the same year as one of my other favorite games of all time, which is Okami, which, the fact that they both came out at the same time and they both have wolves in it, it continues to have people compare the two. But let's be real. We don't need to pit two kings against each other. Both are great experiences for different reasons. Anyways, still a little sad that Twilight Princess may have made Okami flop. I mean, that's not really proven, but some people speculate that's why. If I really had to knock it for anything else, I think the beginning is a little slow, but otherwise, it's just a really good game. Beautiful graphics, beautiful atmosphere, beautiful soundtrack, beautiful everything. I really want to revisit it. I do consider it in my top 3 Zelda games, so I really would like to revisit it sometime. I'm gonna put it under very, very good, but there's a part of me that kind of says it's like in between that and masterpiece, personally for me. Twilight Princess HD. Much like the Wind Waker remaster, I have not played the HD remaster of Twilight Princess. I'd really like to, considering the last time I played Twilight Princess at all was probably 2 years after its release. This will go under Never Played, which I feel like is a category reminding me of how much Zelda I still have left to play. Phantom Hourglass. Alright, so I got a little bit of a story about this one. I remember playing this game on my DS, and I know I didn't get super far because there was something about those controls that did not vibe with my brain. I was also pretty young when this happened. I don't remember what the issue was though. I can't remember because it was like, it had to have been 2 decades ago. It's been a long time. But I remember distinctly wrinkling my nose and being like, ugh, when I played it. But I couldn't tell you why. Again. Maybe I'll go dig out my copy and my DES to try it again sometime. I feel like there were a few things going for it. Conceptually, it was very interesting. I did enjoy the continuation of the Wind Waker story as well. Right now, I'm gonna put it... Part of me is like, I should put it under Never Played, because that's what I did with the Oracle games. We'll put it into I like it, but for the time being. I do hear it's a pretty divisive game, with some people loving it and some people absolutely despising it. So yay, we'll see how I feel if I ever get around to it. Spirit Tracks. I have this game. I have never opened it. I couldn't tell you why. Maybe I was just like upset about Phantom Hourglass that I was like too scared to try it. I believe it was gifted to me by one of my parents though. It'll go under Never Played for now. I really do need to try it out though. I hear it's a good time. I hear it's really good. Skyward Sword. Do you ever see a game and you think to yourself, I really want to like you, but no matter what you do, you can't like the game? because it keeps doing irredeemably annoying stuff. This is how I feel about Skyward Sword. Where do I begin? The Skyward Slash mechanic felt awful to execute. Fee, I think that's her name, Fi, I don't know how you say her name. I called her Fee, so I'm gonna stick with that. Fee made me want to punt my Wii out the window. Like full send, just punt that bad boy out the window. The dungeons felt like they were checking off boxes more than actually exploring the element they were based off of. It felt like we had fire temples and earth temples and all that stuff just because that's what Zelda does. And while this is true for a lot of 2D Zeldas, it felt like the other games had dungeons with a lot more personality, at least in terms of, you know, 3D Zeldas. I feel like all of those dungeons had a lot of just personality and care put into them, whereas the Skyward Sword ones felt just really blah. Except for one, and that's the Ancient Cistern. Another Amalia story. I played Skyward Sword in college, and at the time of playing through the Ancient Cistern, it was like 2 a.m. and I was recovering from a wombo combo of a sinus infection, which I get yearly, and strep throat. Not a great combination, by the way. 0 out of 10. 0 out of 10. I think it was a combination of the medications I was taking to combat the sinus infection and strep. I also had a fever, and it was also 2 a.m., but I swear nothing has scared me more in a Zelda game than Ancient Cistern. Not even Dead Hand. They cooked with that dungeon, and it was fantastic. They may not have cooked with any other dungeon, but they definitely cooked with that one. I guess Sans Ship was also alright, but don't talk to me about the boss. I choose to forget it. Thank you. Skyward Sword, though, really does have some good stuff in it. The story was decent, Groose was a hilarious friendly rival, and I actually do enjoy this depiction of Zelda a lot. The music was also stellar, but there's just a lot of stuff that felt half-baked. The Loftwing and Sky area was almost like the Great Sea in Wind Waker, but it just felt too empty and just lacking. The Kikwi, Perilla, and Mogmas introduced in the game felt just like placeholders to the Koroks, Zora, and Gorons, and they just didn't feel that interesting. And personally, the Silent Realms were anxiety-inducing to the point where they were really not fun. I think I even, for the last one, passed my controller to someone else because I was like, either someone else does this for me, or I'm just not beating this game, because I literally had such bad anxiety over those sections. I'm sorry, it'll take a lot to convince me to want to play Skyward Sword again. Despite what good there is in that game, there's just so much stuff that made me want to pull my hair up. It sadly goes into, I never want to play this again. Skyward Sword HD. Unsurprisingly, did not pick this up when it dropped, even with the alleged fixed controls. Didn't play it, can already tell you it goes next to the original. I never want to play this again. Okay, maybe putting it there would be unfair. I'll probably put it into never played. Just kidding, I'm putting it into I never want to play this again. I've not even played it. I can tell you right now I don't want to play that Splish again. I mean, play that nonsense again. A Link Between Worlds. I'm gonna be honest, didn't play this one either. Heard it was really good. Do have it on my list to play in the future though. Triforce Heroes. I have no idea what this is. Is it good? I have heard nothing about this game. It's going into never played. I've heard nothing about it. Is it good? Tell me in the comments. I don't know. I've heard nothing. Breath of the Wild. I have a lot of complicated feelings about Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. On one hand, I really did enjoy my time playing the both of them. Breath of the Wild was really enchanting to explore, and I will never forget the wave of nostalgia I got when I arrived at the Rito Village for the first time. I heard the Dragon Roost theme, and I think I almost cried, honestly. I think I almost just burst into tears. Initially, with Breath of the Wild, I did not lament the lack of dungeons, as my opinion about dungeons is probably a little on the controversial side. There's a whole video's worth of an argument that I have planned, but the summary of it is that good dungeons really excel, but bad dungeons really bring games down tremendously. That's a very watered down version of what I want to talk about. I'm sure when we get there will be a lot more to it. Not to spoil my own videos. After Skyward Sword, I was very done with mediocre dungeons, so the shrine format worked really well for me personally. I also did play the game with undiagnosed ADHD. Take that into consideration. Breath of the Wild felt really good to play, but I could not help but feel like there was something lacking in it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it for a while, and then it struck me. There's something about the Breath of the Wild world that feels off, and I don't know how else to describe it other than there's just characters that don't feel like characters, and they make up a good portion of the populace. When I think of Zelda, I don't really just think of Zelda and Link and Ganondorf. I think of all of the NPCs that really make the world feel colorful. And I realized during my playthrough of Breath of the Wild, it felt like there was just a lack of that. Put a lot of those NPCs from Breath of the Wild or even Tears of the Kingdom next to some of the NPCs you would see in older titles like Wind Waker or Majora's Mask or Ocarina of Time. They just don't feel interesting. A lot of the NPCs are just not interesting unless they have a direct connection to the main story, such as the champions. There's an argument to be made that maybe there was less emphasis on the NPCs and more emphasis on the environment because of the nature of this particular game. Breath of the Wild having, of course, it's called Breath of the Wild. It's supposed to be focused on the land, how things have changed since Link went to sleep and woke up. It's supposed to probably emphasize that, but I feel like they sacrificed way too much on the NPCs to the point where I felt like there was something just critically lacking in my experience in this Zelda game. Having really colorful NPCs is just something of a Zelda staple, and I feel like we had a few here or there, but there were a lot of characters that felt like they had just been run through a very basic character generator, given a very basic character generator name that was just slapped onto them, and then they were just released into the world. And that is disappointing to me. That is disappointing. I'm not really asking for deep side quests for each and every character, but I wanted way more than what we got. I think the NPCs feeling very same-facey and flat contributes to some sort of emptiness in Breath of the Wild, which you could argue that that's a good thing, but I don't know. To me, it fell flat. And again, this is barring the more integral characters such as Not Falco, Granny Impa, Urbosa, my absolute queen, and Link's fish boyfriend. I don't really even mind that the bulk of the story is told passively through flashbacks. I think for this particular Zelda game, that's brilliant. It really emphasizes the atmosphere, and I like that. I know I've already yapped about this game quite a bit, but just some general thoughts. Really good exploration in this game, really magical, just a really good time, honestly, overall. Really great game. Even if I thought the NPCs were kind of flat, I actually did like the NPCs that they did put a lot of effort and time into, particularly Urbosa and Rivali. Those are really cool characters. I really liked them, and I really liked this take on Zelda as well. If I had to ding the game for one more thing, it would be the lack of interesting boss fights. But I feel like a lot of people kind of have that sentiment. I don't feel like I need to go over it. I just wish that the boss fights had been more interesting. I wish that they had not just been repeats for the most part, although I do kind of see what they were kind of trying to go for. I just don't think they were that fun. I just don't think they were that fun. I think most of the boss fights were kind of lame, if anything, but I do think the finale, I do think the final boss was really well done. So props to them for that. I do think overall Breath of the Wild was kind of a breath of fresh air for the series, even though I don't think I want the series to maintain this kind of setup for the future. I would really like for them to go back to linear, but we'll see what they do. Personally, for me, it goes into a good experience. I do find that I don't feel particularly pulled to replay it though. It's a good time, but I don't feel the urge to pick Breath of the Wild back up and play it all over again. which is kind of a shame because it was a really fun game. I think some of the majesty of that game is kind of lost after your first time. I feel like afterwards it's kind of a little less exciting, but that is kind of something you can say about most games. Tears of the Kingdom. This is actually the final 3D Zelda game I have yet to beat, mostly because it's so freaking long. I really liked my time with it though, until I put it down because life just got really busy and I didn't have time for a big old chunky game like that. I thought the story was really touching from what I saw. Rauru and Sonia are fantastic characters, Mineru too. However, I do think Tears of the Kingdom, I know that there's a lot of controversy about it. I actually do think it's much better than Breath of the Wild. I know, kind of a hot take. I think the powers in Tears of the Kingdom are simply more interesting to work with than powers in Breath of the Wild. I do complain a bit as an old grumpy millennial with limited hours in my day that Tears is a little too big, but it's just a good time. Every time I picked it up, played, for way too many hours, it was just a really good time. It's one of those games that took the first one and made it feel kind of like it was just a tech demo. I know that I've heard some people say that before, and I really do agree with that. It made Breath of the Wild feel like a tech demo. I really did like the inclusion of dungeons as well, and at first I was fine with them being on the simpler side. But after some thought, I think I would have preferred that they had made them a little more like the traditional 3D Zelda dungeons. I don't say that very lightly, as I'm very hit or miss on dungeons in general, as we've already established. But I do think this would have been a big improvement to the game, probably. I know some people here are expecting me to bash on this game because that's what, is new and hot, and everybody's doing that these days, but I really don't think it deserves the hate that it gets, if I'm totally honest. We've entered this bizarre arc in gaming culture where people decide something's bad, like half of a year to a year after it's been released, despite the overall opinion of the game being super, super good for the first few months. It's kind of troubling, and I'll be honest, I think most of it is engagement bait, because hating on stuff gets you clicks more often than not. People like that sweet, sweet controversy. But anyways, Tears of the Kingdom is a really good game. Definitely better than Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. Also definitely not my top 3 though. But it's still quite good, and I don't really lament the timeline problem it presents because frankly, I think there's a lot of ways around it. If you just place every single redacted descriptive word seen in Tears of the Kingdom, for instance, after any other Zelda game other than Breath of the Wild, it just kind of works for the most part. I'm being vague to avoid spoiling people, but if you know, you know. When it comes to stuff like timelines in particular, and just other little lore consistencies in Zelda, it's kind of a mess anyways, and it should probably be treated more as guidelines, as Captain Barbosa would put it, rather than solid, rules. At least in my opinion. I feel like that's how it should be. The reused map doesn't bother me either because we kind of knew the whole time that was gonna happen. I feel like if you're upset that they reused the map, you must not have been paying attention at all. We kind of knew that was gonna happen. Just in general, I do kind of want to echo some of the stuff I said about Breath of the Wild. I don't super like how the NPCs are done here, but I do think they were improved upon a little bit, at least in personality. Continuing on with some other complaints I had about Breath of the Wild, I do think they improved things like the boss fights. I did like that while, the dungeons were not entirely like how they were in the linear Zeldas, they're a little bit more simplified. I know I talked about that already, but I'm bringing it up again because I feel like Tears of the Kingdom and what it did was that it addressed as many of the main issues that people had about Breath of the Wild and that game, and they really tried to make it better. And I do feel like they succeeded for the most part. I do feel like they improved on this game a lot compared to its predecessor. Tears of the Kingdom, for me, goes into a very, very good experience. I'm gonna be skipping over some of these next few ones because I haven't played a lot of them. Just so we're aware, Link's crossbow training. I only know memes about this. I'm very sorry. I haven't played it. Hyrule Warriors. Also have not played it. Hyrule Warriors Legends. Didn't even know this existed until I saw this tier list. Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition. I have played this one, and I will say this, it was a pretty good time. I'm a bit of a Dynasty Warriors fan, believe it or not. A lot of high school summers were spent staying out of the Midwestern heat with a tub of mint chocolate chip ice cream and endless hours of Dynasty, Warriors 6, Empires in particular, with my older sister. I had a blast with Hyrule Warriors, and I didn't really mind how cheesy it is. It's an incredibly cheesy game. But most Warriors games just kind of are, so I'm just kind of like used to that being equated with anything Warriors. It's gonna be delightfully cheesy. It just made sense that this one would also be cheesy as well, just given who was making it. Did I really care for the story? Not, like, really. Did I have a good time, though? Yeah. And that's all that really matters. I'm gonna put this in a good experience. Personally for me, but I understand why some people may not like it. To each their own. Cadence of Hyrule. I have not played this, and very sadly, I am atrocious at rhythm games, so I don't see myself ever playing this, and I'm very sorry about that. I'm sure it's a great game, though. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Alright, if you guys thought I ripped Skyward Sword a new one, sit down, because you have not seen anything yet. I will be so honest, I was extremely looking forward to this game. I played the demo, I loved it. I vouched for it to other people. I bought the game to co-op with a friend because we needed something new for gaming nights. I really wanted to love this game. I don't think you could convince me to boot it up ever again. I didn't finish it, but it made me so angry that I probably shouldn't even try to finish it. Age of Calamity was honestly set up to be so perfect. We got to see the champions and Link and Zelda and everything before the Calamity happened. We got to see Hyrule in its prime. It was kind of perfect. It had a perfect setup, and yet Nintendo fumbled this one super hard. Couch co-op with this game is a nightmare, with the game's performance lagging exceptionally when both players are fighting on screen at the same time. Even playing solo, I noticed there were a lot of frame rate drops that got worse and worse as the game went on. Despite me being a big fan of Warriors games, this game just felt really flat. There were a lot of side missions to do, but they felt too numerous, too tedious at times, and kind of like shameless game padding. The enemies were extremely repetitive, carrying on from the major gripe that a lot of people had about Breath of the Wild. I do kind of see maybe why there were so many repetitive enemies, because the game was supposed to lead into Breath of the Wild, so I'll cut them a little bit of slack for that, but just a little bit. I think the biggest offender about Age of Calamity, however, is that Nintendo was not exactly honest about what the game's story is. Nintendo originally marketed this game as a true prequel to Breath of the Wild, but the reality is actually pretty far different. Just a bit of a spoiler warning ahead, I can't really talk about my feelings about this without spoiling something, so I'm gonna give you a few seconds to click out of this video, or if you'd like, skip ahead to the ending of the video, whichever you'd like. Anyways, this game takes place in an alternate universe, where the champions survive Calamity Ganon and his forces. There is a whole plot involving time travel and how the characters in Age of Calamity know they are all going to die. And the story of the game is how they avoid the Calamity and live. It is not a prequel to Breath of the Wild. It's not even really the same timeline. And sure, it's sort of a throwback to the idea of a split timeline where Link falls to Ganondorf and we have the whole fallen timeline or whatnot. But the way it's done is nonsensical, often relying on Deus Ex Machina storytelling. I feel like Age of Calamity tries to circumvent Breath of the Wild in all the wrong ways. The writing serves to make the Calamity feel less severe and mortifying than it was. And as a result, I feel like it takes away from the impact that Breath of the Wild really has. Breath of the Wild was really bold in its setting. The bad guys won, the good guys lost, people died, and not just faceless randos but friends. That was bold for Nintendo. Age of Calamity could have been such a good way to depict the tragedy of all that happened, but instead, it was like Nintendo said, a sad story? Whoa, we can't do that. Not one where our heroes lose. We can't have that. Give them the golden ending. Nobody asked for it and nobody really wants it, but give them that golden ending because we can't have our heroes lose. We can't have a sad story at the end of our Legend of Zelda game. And frankly, it's infuriating. Zelda is a series that has had sad stories in it aplenty. Look at Majora's Mask. You don't need to look much further than that game. Oh my gosh, there's so many sad stories in there. But as soon as it involves the good guys losing, and actually showing the good guys losing on screen fully, and not just chopped up cutscenes, mind you, fully showing them losing, it feels like Nintendo chickened out. That's how it feels to me, at least. Maybe they were worried it would leave the players feeling unsatisfied or upset that they couldn't just win and have it be a happy ending in their Zelda game. I feel like that's a cop-out reason personally. There are games who tackle failure and major character death really beautifully while also making the game's ending feel satisfying. The best example I can think of is Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core, which is a game whose ending just haunts me even to this day, but was just done so beautifully. Then again, that is a rated T game, and I'm pretty sure Nintendo wanted to keep Zelda pretty family friendly. I just can't help but feel like Nintendo did not want to be bold in this case, even though Breath of the Wild was really bold. Nintendo games are supposed to be family friendly, which I grant, right? I grant them that. It's supposed to be family friendly. Would Link watching his friends all die horribly before the credits roll be that family friendly? I guess not. But still, it felt like such a cheap and undesired game, and I feel like the resources could have been allocated to something people actually were asking for rather than a Deus Ex Machina simulator. Now stop, wait, pause. There is one more thing I need to talk about with Age of Calamity. Someone watching this video is probably thinking to themselves, wait a second, I thought when you were going over Hyrule Warriors Definitive Edition, you said story doesn't matter in Warriors games because it's all cheesy anyways. To which I say, yes, I did say that, but there's a reason that it works for that game and not Age of Calamity. Here is that reason. Hyrule Warriors never pretends to be anything except for what it is, and that is just a simple, goofy, cheesy time with an over-the-top plot. It owns it. It owns what it is. Age of Calamity tries to be both the cheesy Warriors game that we kind of expect it should be because it is a Warriors title, while also trying to be serious and about a serious event that happened in Hyrule. The problem is it tried to be both at the same time. It tried to tell the story about the fall of Hyrule, but also not exactly tell that story because it wasn't ever going to tell that story because Nintendo didn't want it to tell that story. It wanted it to be a golden ending, but it tried to do both the serious and the cheese. The cheese being the over-the-top story with the time travel and just all of that shenanigans. It kind of tried to be both. And I feel like you just can't really be both. You kind of have to commit. Because if you don't commit, and this is something that a lot of movies and games do, they don't commit to one or the other. They don't own what they are. And if you don't commit, and if you don't just own what the game or the movie is, you come out with this weird thing that has kind of an identity problem. And I feel like Age of Calamity really suffered from that. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be cheesy, hammy, just goofy Warriors times with an over-the-top plot that was really, really nonsensical. It couldn't decide if it wanted to be that or if it wanted to be serious, if it wanted to tell a moving, riveting story. And so the result is that it failed at both. I'm going to stop this rant right here because I feel like I could go on for probably hours about this. Maybe I will at some point. It is something that is really common in media, I've noticed, is a lack of committing, which results in a sort of like bleh product. That's what I feel like happened with Age of Calamity. With that being said, Age of Calamity goes into I never want to play this again. Just one more note before we wrap up. I do want to say about tier list videos and opinion videos moving forward. Obviously, all of these opinions are mine, and while I'm glad to share the opinion with a lot of people, I really don't want my opinions to sway anybody. I'm just providing my arguments for why I like and dislike things, and I encourage people to go and play every game, even the ones I say are not great. Go play them. Go form your own opinions. Come back and tell me about it, you know? I make these videos so people can get my perspective. My intention here is not to persuade anybody to feel any kind of way, so if you feel some kind of way about a game and maybe I dunked on it, maybe you're a huge Age of Calamity fan, I'm honestly happy for you. Like, I wish I could have enjoyed that game. I wish I could have enjoyed Skyward Sword more. I'm happy that you had a good time with them. I don't think we all need to have the same opinion about stuff. The world would be pretty boring if we did. So that is my little PSA. Let's wrap up. And that concludes the tier list. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope that... What was that? Hey! Aren't you forgetting something? What are you doing here? What about these? Oh, absolutely not. Get those out of here. But they're Zelda's too. No. Uh-oh. Anyways, thank you so much for watching today's video. Feel free to tell me how wrong I am in the comments, or how right I am. But most importantly, make sure you have a good day. I mean it. Eat a good snack, treat yourself, and if someone tells you not to, you can tell them a little dragon on the internet told you to. And then show them this video. Bye!